Teachers of Reddit. What was the trashiest thing you've seen a parent do? Story 1. Staff raised money to get an 8-year-old girl a winter coat. Live in rural Canada. Girl came to school the next day in a t-shirt in the dead of winter. Her mom wearing the brand new child-size jacket. Edit. For those wondering, the principal confronted her about it, and mom told her to off and anything her kids owned belonged to her, and she could do what she wanted with it. Children's Aid was called, and that student lives with a very nice foster family now. Edit 2. Mother was rail thin, looked like the stereotypical junkie archetype. The sleeves were 3 too short, didn't cover most of her stomach, and she could do it up properly. Story 2. Work at a school where over 80% of our population lives under the poverty line. I keep a cabinet full of hygiene products for kids to take. Deodorant, lotion, chapstick, hair gel, feminine hygiene products, shampoo, conditioner, those kinds of things in travel sizes. Being a teen is hard enough without having to cope with hygiene problems due to lack of funds at home. So one day the entire thing is empty. Odd. I refill the cabinet and 2 days later, all of it is gone again. Refill with the last of my supplies. Catch the kid in the act of sweeping everything in his bag. I stop him. Take him in the other room and talk to him. He told his mother about the cabinet. She ordered him to bring her everything he could get. She was returning the items to Walmart for store credit to buy cigarettes and beer. I told him to tell her the cabinet is locked now. I bought a bike lock, so it was not a lie. It is sickening. Edit. Feminine for feline. Update. The lock was only on until the student left. It has been on the honor system for 15 years. Over 1,700 student and only one abuser of the system. I call that a good record. Some asked or commented about feminine hygiene products and their availability at the nurse or health office. I added them early onto the cabinet when I found out that the nurse charged $0.50 for them and refused to let girls take one on credit. Sorry for the typo, you autocorrect. But hey, it made you laugh. Story 3. Woman. I used to babysit for worked in a school as an assistant or some in Toronto. She always told this story about how the class rabbit would go home with a new kid each weekend. They kept trying to avoid giving one kid the bunny for the weekend because it was clear his home life wasn't the best. But they finally caved and let him take the rabbit home. The parents killed the rabbit and ate it. They killed the class bunny and fried it up for dinner. They weren't even ashamed when they told the teacher what happened on Monday. Said they were out of groceries or something. Edit. I wish I had more details, but I haven't seen this woman in a few years, so I only remember the basics of the story. This incident happened around 20 or more years ago, so I'm not sure about the aftermath. I had almost completely forgot about it until I saw this thread and was reminded of this fuckery. As far as I remember, the family was very clearly trashy and irresponsible, and that's why the school didn't want that kid to take the animal for the weekend. Story 4. I volunteer at after-school programs to help tutor. I had a student earlier this year. Good kid. Loves math. Loves computers, wants to be a programmer when he grows up. He's really struggling in 7th grade because he has no computer at home. We have to do his online assignments at the program, but we only meet twice a week. I pulled his mom aside and explained how he could be doing much better in school with some kind of PC and internet access at home. She says she can't afford a computer. I tell her that for $200 I could piece all the parts together myself for a fully functional setup that would be sufficient for at least the next few years. I'd even build it with him so he could learn some extremely valuable information. I'd even front her half, but she'd have to pay me back. She says no way. Still way out of her budget. Mind you, while we're having this conversation, she's barely looking up to speak to me. Too busy scrolling through the gram on her iPhone X. I say it. I'll do it myself. Scrap together all of the parts I can for free. I only had to buy an HDD. The setup was really out of date, but still worked. Gave it to them. Kid was thrilled. About a month later, I notice he's trying to finish all his HW at the program again. I ask his mom if everything's okay with the computer. She says it broke down. I say, okay, what happened? I'll pick it up and try to fix it. She says she had to throw it away. I pull the kid aside and ask him. He tells me she sold it to her cousin for $50. I really don't like calling people trashy when they're apparently stuck in a culture of poverty. Maybe she needed that $50 for the light bill or groceries. But at the same time, she spends 3x that amount on her cell phone each month, so it really just broke my heart. It was like she's doing everything in her power to ensure the kid has no fucking chance at a decent life. Story 5. Well, in my profession, it's more often what the parents don't do that wins them the Parent of the Year award. But I do have a couple Hall of Famers. I'm a special education teacher, so I deal with kids with all kinds of physical, emotional, and academic disabilities. I took care of a little girl once who had a number of complications due to spina bifida. Her mother couldn't be bothered to take care of her. The little girl wore diapers and was cathed. She required 3 to 5 diaper changes a day. Mom would only send 5 diapers a week. The thing is, she was getting full services from her community, so she was being provided with plenty of supplies. We suspect Mom was probably selling the extras. I ended up just buying her diapers. Mom would not change her catheter regularly. We would change her out at school, but other than that, she'd go another 24 hours before a change-out. Longer, if it was a weekend. The smell from the infections she'd get after a weekend was horrendous. She had lice constantly and oozing bedbug sores. Mom told us to F off when we'd call and tell her to take her to a doctor. Found out later in the year that she also had scabies. We offered to administer the medications and creams at school. Mom told us to go too. Girl would come to school in men's underwear, XXL shirts, and size 16 pants. She was 8. Finally discovered that her 9-year-old sister was changing her diapers and dressing her every day, and sister couldn't find any other cleanish clothes to put on her. Mom's response: "I'm busy. I have to get to work in the mornings." Final straw was when the nurse discovered what appeared to be STD warts while changing her diaper one day. Nurse made, for the 10th time, another CPS report, but principal insisted that we call home and report our findings. Grandma found out, tipped off Mom, and Mom appeared at the school 15 minutes later, snatched up the kids and disappeared. Investigators showed up 15 minutes later, but Mom was already long gone. Never saw the kids again. Story 6. The cafeteria, which is used for parent meetings, has tables with fixed bench seating. You have to swing a leg over to sit down. Parent wore a short skirt and was commando. She also got up several times. Story 7. I called a parent about a behavior issue. I must have been on speakerphone because I heard the kid come home. Parent starts screaming at and wailing on the kid, cussing, calling them all sorts of names. I don't even know if the parent remembered I was on the phone. I hung up the phone and went to my principal. Teachers are mandated reporters. Don't hit your kids in front of a teacher. Story 8. I work in a school in one of the most socially deprived areas of the UK. At Parents' Evening, we give every parent a printout of their child's grades in each subject, alongside their target grades. Last year, we had the parent of an 11-year-old respond to this printout by shouting, "What the am I gonna do with this? I can't fucking read, can I?" This was in front of other children, parents, and her child's teachers. Edit. After only 1 year in this school, there's actually a pretty long list of things I've seen parents do, or have heard other staff members claim to have seen parents do. Edit 2. Since a few people have asked, the school is in the Midlands. I don't want to be any more specific just in case anyone figures out which school it is. Final edit. People seem to be torn on seeing this as just trashy, or more as sad, as if I might be picking on her a bit. Just to be clear, I'm not making fun of her. A quick laugh behind closed doors at things like this seems to give a bit of levity for teachers in schools like mine. It can be tough, but I think the majority of people who work in these areas do it because they want to help conquer some of the social inequalities or issues that people are facing, whether that's for pure humanistic beliefs, their own ego, or just because it feels like you're accomplishing something. Maybe a bit of each. Regardless, I feel sympathy for the woman in question and her daughter. One of the aims of my job is to help prevent people reaching adulthood without the necessary skills to thrive. Her behavior doesn't change that, and doesn't make me assume I'm a higher class of person than she is, just dealt a different hand, I guess. Story 9. I'm a high school teacher. One time, a parent of a child who had been going back and forth with another child on social media came to the school to confront the other girl. The mom ended up bursting into my classroom to try to fight one of my 9th grade girls, sending us into a lockdown until the woman was removed by the police. Edit. I want to make clear that the systems in place have failed this woman, her family, and her friends at basically every level, and I can understand why she felt like she didn't trust any systems to handle the situation. The fact that many comments went straight to talking about race is disappointing. By the end of the school year, this particular mother was helping chaperone events and was a good role model for our young people. Her daughter was one of the best performing students in the grade. So, although this particular event was traumatizing for a lot of people, let's not use it to justify any kind of racism or generalizations. Okay, thanks. Story 10. My mom is a middle school teacher. Just about every day, some parent doesn't come pick up their kids because they literally forgot about them or were passed out drunk on drugs. Then the poor child gets sent to daycare, which is not free. Then the parents complain about the charge. My mom has had to bring random kids home before who barely know the way home. It's really sad. Story 11. I'm not a teacher, but my mother is. It was her birthday, and I live 3 hours away from her. I drove to my parents' house unannounced to surprise her for her birthday. She was obviously working as it was school hours, so I drove to the school she works at just as they were finishing. I was heading to the staff room, which is behind the reception area. I was about to announce myself to the receptionist and ask to wait for Mum in the staff room when this angry-as dad storms in. He was abusing the out of the poor receptionist because his daughter got in trouble for being in class. The principal comes out and tries to defuse the situation, and a minute later my mother comes in on her way to the staff room. It's hectic in there, and then all of a sudden, the angry dad headbutts the principal right in the face. My mother screams, and angry dad turns and takes one step towards her. Before he got any further, I, without thinking, punched that in the face and his nose disappeared. Police came shortly after and I wasn't charged. It was classified as restraining with reasonable force due to him headbutting. Happy birthday, Mum. Story 12. Mother came to a school sports day, swigging from a bottle of wine. We always felt desperately sorry for her daughter, because whenever she returned to school following a holiday at home, this was a boarding school, we had to wash all her clothes because they reeked of cigarettes. And this poor little girl was easily the most unhappy child I've ever seen. Story 13. Not a teacher, but a college administrator. Parents will call in very frequently when there is an issue with their student's living situation. If they're an frequent, I quote FERPA to them. Best example, I had to bill a student for around $600 in damages to their room at the end of the year. Mom called me pissed off about this because they had tried to repair the damages poorly. She ended up yelling about this over the phone, and I reminded her that her son was 22 years old and that I could only talk with him about this. Kid calls me back the next day and apologizes for his mom being a to me and asks if I'm able to just bullshit his mom when she calls back. It's a weird line of work. Edit. This got big. Some vocabulary I've learned for other folks dealing with this. Snowplow parents. Story 14. My cousin is a teacher, and she once had a parent come to a parent-teacher conference extremely drunk, and right before the meeting tried to pull out a bag of coke and start doing lines. Police were called, and so was CPS. The school also had to call 911 once because a parent overdosed in the parking lot while waiting to pick up their kid, and the poor kid was too young to understand why their mom was slumped over in their car. Story 15. Wreck their car buying drugs on the way to pick their child up from preschool, and then try to get another parent to cover for them with their estranged husband. Story 16. Not really due, but once while waiting for parents to arrive to a parents' evening conference, my colleague pointed out one of my students' father sitting in the waiting area. He said, "You see the woman sitting next to him? Well, that's his wife. And the woman sitting on the other side of him? Well, that's her sister, and also his other wife." Story 17. When I taught English in China, my good friend and colleague started sleeping with one of the mothers, a woman 15 years his senior and married. I taught her daughter, and would often hear stories about how they snuck around behind the husband's back. Story 18. This one was pretty funny. A parent brought out a pack of sweets or something, and her son asked, "Can I have some?" To which the mother responded, "Where's your fucking manners? How about fucking please?" I facepalmed so hard. Story 19. My mom's story. A girl and her parents were being interviewed before starting high school. The primary school this girl went to notified the high school that the girl was autistic. When my mom tried to discuss how they can best cater to the girl's needs, the parents interrupted. The parents sent the kid out of the room. Say to my mom, "She's not autistic anymore. She grew out of it." The girl is clearly autistic and the school was trying to help. Story 20. I have two. There is a parent who would walk through our closed campus every single day. As teachers, we are supposed to stop her because it's a closed campus. Every single day, she would pretend she didn't know the rules. We always knew it was the same parent because she let her younger children who weren't in school yet ride around on their scooters ahead of her. One day, she was walking through with a stroller. She was not paying attention, and her freaking baby started falling out of the front of the stroller. I saw 4 teachers jump up to help the kid, and the mom didn't even acknowledge. The other one happened directly to me during parent-teacher conferences. I was meeting with a mom and her live-in boyfriend about her son. At the end of the conference, I asked if they had any questions I could answer for them, and he started asking me personal questions and flirting with me. I deflected and told them I had more conferences. But other teachers have told me that parents have hit on them before, so it's probably pretty common. Story 21. Not a teacher anymore, but an RN. Kid wakes up from dental surgery. A 4-year-old who needed a root canal, several extractions and fillings. Horrible dentition. Mom, dad, nowhere to be found post-op. Eventually wander into recovery in from parking lot, reeking of cigarettes and weed. Proceed to give the 4-year-old a baby bottle of Mountain Dew. The pediatric dentist took the parents aside into a consult room and yelled at lectures them. They told him to mind his own fucking business, scooped up the kid and walked out. Saddest part was, I remember the poor kiddo had filthy feet and hair, also reeked of cigarettes. He looked so defeated already. All I could think was that this kid has an uphill battle for a decent life. Being an RN is heartbreaking, not always for the reasons you'd expect. Story 22. My mom's a teacher, and in order to talk to a parent about a child that was struggling due to the school environment, she arranged to meet at the parent's house. Keep in mind this was scheduled in advance with a set time. The dad answered the door 100% naked and tried to have the meeting with him naked on the front porch. My mom doesn't do anything outside the school anymore. Edit. Spelling. Story 23. Not a teacher, but my dad once worked as a groundskeeper at a primary school. Worst thing he ever saw was a guy dropping his daughter off to school, and before she went through the gate, her dad went through her school bag and took out all of her packed food and left eating it, essentially leaving her with nothing to eat that day. Dad was so angry. He said he wanted to knock the guy out right then and there for leaving his child with no food for the day, but he ended up going straight to the principal to tell them what he witnessed so it could be investigated properly and get the kid help. Story 24. I work in a middle school with an elementary school next door. 2 girls from my school were arguing all day, and told their parents about it when they got out of school. The parents proceeded to call their families up to the elementary school and fought in front of a bunch of kindergartners, knives and everything. Cops were called. I think some of the parents are still in jail for gun possession parole violations. One of the kids was pulled from our school and put in foster care. Story 25. I had a kid whose aunt was his legal guardian. I told her that he was acting up in class and not doing work, so she threatened to put him back into foster care if he didn't pull his together. Story 26. Blamed me for their child's suicide attempt. Their kid wasn't even coming to my class, and the suicide attempt was apparently not bad enough to hospitalize her or get her the help she needed. The parent confronted me with this in the fall. By the spring, we had a meeting with us, the kid, and my administration, and the parent came around to the fact that their child was essentially gaslighting them and using me as a scapegoat. But blaming someone who had spent maybe 5 hours with their child in a group setting for a suicide attempt was really low. Story 27. Used to work with teenagers who had behavior problems in a special school. One day, a student of mine had a disorganization. He started punching staff and students alike while screaming. It took 5 male teachers to hold him down. The headmaster called his mom so she could pick him up. She had 10 minutes. If longer, we would call the cops. The mother arrived 8 minutes later, a woman in her late 40s with bleach blonde hair, wearing a mini skirt and a crop top. She came in yelling and swearing at her son. She picked him up and smacked him at the back of the head while telling him he was a good-for-nothing idiot. The apple does not fall far from the tree. Edit. What I meant by the apple does not fall far from the tree is that I understood from then on why this kid was violent and angry all the time. Often, the parent's behavior is reproduced by the child. Story 28. IDK if this counts, but back in elementary school, my friends and I made a pretty successful business making survival bracelets. Since we were the only ones making them, we had a monopoly and sold them for $5 and customs $8. The PTO parent-teacher organization, who are in charge of festivals and organization of other things outside of education, they found out and saw a money pit. They basically told us we couldn't sell them anymore unless we gave all the profits to the PTO. By the end, we probably made around $500 until we were forced to stop. We even tried doing them through a black market for selling them and keeping the profits. Then the PTO found out and we got suspended and finally decided to stop. Fucking assholes. Story 29. Not a parent, but we had a babysitter who would roll up about 2 feet from the curb in her ancient dented-to-gold van, have a preteen in the back slide the door open, and then scream, "Get in!" at the tiny 5-year-old she was picking up. The poor girl started crying every time. Story 30. Parent witness to a event, not a teacher. My kid's very first day of school, she's 412. In the gym hall, all the kids and parents are in lines according to class, and one by one the teachers come and take them away. Our group was last to go. As we are waiting, a guy storms in, clearly drunk, starts shouting at a woman in the line, "Why the didn't you tell me it was now? I've been looking everywhere, etc., etc." He slapped the mum. Another dad in the line pulls drunk dad away and pushes him. He falls down on top of another kid. That kid's mum screams. Drunk starts to run out. Squished kids, dad chases him. He made it out of the gym but then got caught and the kicked out of him in the school reception. Everyone is freaked out. Kids are crying. Then the very happy teacher who is completely unaware comes in. I start Googling prices for private schools. Story 31. During a parent-teacher conference, the mom showed up late with a tiny dog inside her shirt, with his little head sticking out between her. When we sat down, she took him out, and he walked all over the table we were sitting at during the conference. Story 32. I, female, was co-coaching basketball with a newly divorced dad who came to every game with his girlfriend in 2008. She was an overbearing. Long story. Turns out that youth coach was having an affair with this, from where they both work, and that co-coach had told his wife and 3 kids, one of which was on the team, on Christmas Eve, that he was leaving for this other woman. IDK. What happened? But they broke up sometime later. Sometime after that, the football coach got a parent pregnant. You guessed it. Same. After the baby was born, he took another job. I haven't seen him since. Interestingly, the mom's daughter ended up being something like a nationally qualified runner. I'm thinking run. Faster. Story 33. Mom slept with her daughter's adult boyfriend. Kicks daughter out of house. Daughter goes to live with dad. Mom tries to say dad molested daughter. Real piece of work. Story 34. I used to work at a high school in Oklahoma. One of my students had a Ku Klux Klan (KKK) profile picture and was promptly questioned by me and the assistant principal. The student claimed that he was actually part of the KKK and that he identified with being a member of the KKK. After we called his parents, they agreed with him, claimed that they were also part of the KKK, then said that our family can have whatever beliefs we want, and if we decide to be hate all non-whites, so be it. Fuck your new black culture school. Warner. Story 35. I used to work in a daycare, and on my first day in a new room with 15 24-month-olds, I picked up a little boy and noticed he had dropped something through the neck hole in his onesie. I pulled it out, and it was a lighter. When we returned it to the mom and told her where we found it, she laughed and said, This kid gets his hands on everything. Poor kid also sounded like a smoker every time he laughed or coughed. Story 36. Sitting in a parent-teacher conference with several teachers and at least one administrator present, the mom plucks a hair from her head and starts flossing her teeth with said hair. Story 37. Our vice principal is a former Army sergeant who's built like a tank. He's well-liked and an amazing role model in a community where many of our kids don't have a good male role models. On several occasions, I've seen mothers step well over the line and make very sexual comments to him directly in front of their kids. I mean, in plain sight of their own children and in ways the kids notice. He's always very respectful and often asks another staff member to join him if he sees one of these parents coming to talk. But it's pretty trashy when it comes to some of the innuendo I've overheard. These aren't jokes either. They try to get handsy with him too. Story 38. Let's talk about parent email addresses. Ocean Princess, Juicy Diamond, Snuggle Sweetie. Really? I have higher standards for your 13-year-old's Quizlet profile. Story 39. It was my first year teaching at an elementary school in Cuba with my colleague U Tempen 123. Dad showed up with his son. This boy was a little shy in class and he was very bright and responsible. He had started the year below grade level and had worked hard to get on track. The dad was smelling strongly of alcohol and animals, weaving and slurring his words. I called the office to have someone come down. We escorted them to the office and had him wait. He ended up getting sick in the trash can. I remember the look of embarrassment, anger, and sadness on the son's face. I had other conferences scheduled so I couldn't stay long, but the police had to be called by the administration. The next day, the son came in and said he was sorry. I told him I was proud of him, and that I was sorry his dad was sick and that I hoped he felt better soon. That seemed to cheer him up a little. I sent home the progress report and great examples of his classwork. I did try to reschedule, but it never happened. The worst of it was around the holidays, this student would ask if he could come home with me, or he'd mention that he wished I was his mom. I told him that his family would miss him too much and he said, no, they won't. It broke my heart. He moved schools the following year. Banned. Story 40. Obligatory. Not a teacher. My mom is a principal, though. One of her students was caught shoplifting and subsequently kicked off the cheerleading squad. The mother called the school complaining that she wasn't stealing because she put it back after she was caught. Story 41. I'm a male elementary teacher. I've had some sketchier parents make weird comments to me. Small rural area, and there are some poverty, drug problems, and I can feel some single mothers staring at me because I have a decent job. Story 42. Not a teacher, but there were two students who got into a fight, so they were sitting in the office and called the parents. The parents proceed to show up, and they got into a fight too. Who would have guessed? Story 43. Oh my God. I've worked in behavior units juvies for a few years, so you can imagine the families we get. My favs took the kids out on the last day of term. Pull into the driveway and one of the kids' mothers is standing there. Can of Monster in one hand, cigarette in the other, and wearing a mini skirt and knee-high boots in the middle of winter. One grandparent used to come in wearing a dirty singlet with his belly hanging out, would try to kiss me and called me love, darling, and babe. A kid left grounds without permission so didn't have his phone, etc., which we confiscate. Mum came to pick it up, and when the principal tried to engage her in a conversation about her son's behavior, she attacked him with her handbag. Story 44. My kid went to the preschool run by the public school system. One day I saw one of his classmates. Every student was either 3 or 4. Moms opened the front passenger door. Kid climbed in, and they drove off with the radio cranked and the little girl dancing on the seat leaning against the dashboard. The back seat was totally empty, not even a car seat. The next day, I offered the lady my other kid's seat. I'd buy another one on the way home. She told me to off and drove away with her daughter again standing on the front seat. I let the principal know, and we watched the car drive off into traffic towards the highway. All day 3, I've called the police, but they'll only come out if I call during the pickup. Great. That'll only take 30 minutes for them too. After mom drives up with daughter dancing on the seat again, I tell the principal I'm reporting the mom to family services if she won't intervene. On day 4, a guy shows up in her car and comes nose to nose with me, without even so much as an introduction. He says, if I keep harassing his woman, I'll regret it. I tell the principal, nothing she can do. They stopped bringing the kid to school after that. Story 45. Not myself, but I was in a LTR with a religious studies teacher I went to uni with. One of the modules she had to teach was about Islam. She had a few parents who would send their kids into school with their homework not done, and a handwritten note on the homework saying along the lines of, I have told Bobby not to do this homework because I don't want my child learning about this religion, and I will report you in the school if you try to make him. Story 46. Went on a trip to America for the performing arts. Parent met their kid at the end of the trip for the last 2 days. Parent went out and got hammered both nights and would sneak into her students' rooms, faced and wake all the kids up to try and party. Tagged along to our final tour dinner with all the kids and got hammered again. Worst person ever. Story 47. Not a teacher but leader of a camp for children. We had a child, let's call him Bob, about 8 years old. After 3 days of camp and 11 more to come, we found out he already run out of clean socks. Well, we called his mother and she told us that they are from far away and she couldn't drive there or sent them. After about 10 minutes of talking, we came to conclusion that we will wash his dirty socks and she will bring new one on the visiting day. Visiting day is in the middle of the camp, and as it came, his mother showed up. We were kind of surprised because she sounded like she did not care over the phone. Visiting day ended, and all children were supposed to go to the forest to play games and forget about parents for next 7 days. That is when Bob told us his mother took all of his socks, even those he had on his feet. We called Bob's mother again, and she just said it is our problem, so take care of it and hang up. I called my mother and asked her if she has any socks left from when I was young. She luckily had, and drove them to us. Bob left with 10 new pairs of socks and never came to our camp again. Story 48. When I was a sub, I had to sub a 4th grade class for 2 weeks. The kids had to write a story about their family and read them to the class. The smartest girl in the class wrote about the dog her dad gave her, except every time she mentioned the word dad, she said, "My dad. Sorry, I mean the donor." I asked the office about it. Her mom is crazy AF. Story 49. Not a teacher, but definitely saw it happen. Dude talks trash about this girl's cousins. Yes, cousins of all things. There are tight groups of friends, and her friends were not happy and confronted him. Next day, his mom has the audacity to come over and threatens the entire staff and students with some special injection that will make them retarded. As if she showing up to defend her son who is to blame was not surprising enough. She goes on to throw a shit show of accusations and consequences. Our principal, who is a loudmouth retired general, just stood there dumbfounded. Story 50. I've probably posted this before. Years ago, I was teaching 4-year-olds at a preschool. My assistant had emigrated from Russia. We got on well together, and our class had a good year. It wasn't until the last week of school that my preschool director told me that a parent had tried to buy out my assistant's contract in the hopes of getting her out of my classroom. Apparently, my assistant's accent scared her child. The kid was fine. It was the bigoted parent who had the problem with the accent. Story 51. My wife is a special education teacher at a school that is about a 50-50 mix between lower middle class and extreme poverty-stricken elementary student. One of her co-workers had a behavioral student that kept lashing out and having the cops called on them. His mother was never home as she was well known to be both addicted to meth and willing to sell herself to pay for said drugs. The last week of school this year, he started a bunch of fights, and the principal decided to just suspend him for the last 3 days of school. Principal called the mom, who was out of state and left their 8-year-old home alone, that the kid was suspended for the rest of the year. The mom responds, over speaker, that the school is run by racist white bitches and that she's gonna come over there and kick all y'all white bitches' asses, and just kept screaming that over and over. Mom is white, kid is white. The principal hung up, CPS was called. Story 52. Not a teacher, but one time a fucked up kid took home the class hamster, and to no one's surprise it died. When he brought back in the body, it was very obvious he had shoved something massive up its butthole and killed it that way. Dude ended up being in and out of rehab for all sorts of throughout high school. Story 53. I worked with infants in a daycare where 85% of the children were there on vouchers. The government was paying for their care BC, their parents couldn't. Had a mom who was 27 with 5 kids, newborn to 9 years old, all from different fathers. Every single one of her children were mixed, but she was constantly talking about how much she hated black people. I was one of 5 other white women in a staff of 20, and she was not afraid to tell me she didn't trust the other black women with her newborn, who I practically raised from 4 weeks to nearly a year. She would only give the baby girl to me at drop-off, and would often complain if she saw anyone else holding her. She would bring her kids in at opening, 6 a.m., and wouldn't come back until half an hour to an hour after closing, 6 p.m. Once so late, we had to call the police because we thought she'd abandoned them. She talked about how she wasn't making enough money and could hardly pay her rent, but always had fresh nails and went to the hair salon monthly. Her 2-year-old had very coily mixed hair and would come in with mats, tangles, and week-old braids. Some of the other black women who knew how to take care of that kind of hair would do so during the day, and the mom was always pissed about it and accused them of trying to tell her how to raise her daughter. My last day at that job, I told my director about her racist comments and behavior towards the other women, so she pulled the mom into her office to talk about it when she picked up her kids that day, late, as per usual. A week after that, I had a coworker text me and tell me she pulled all 5 of her kids from the daycare. I never saw the little one again and think about her often. She's gonna be 2 soon. I hope she's doing okay.